Hello, everyone. We will embark on a literary journey through the fascinating worlds of some of those influential and diverse authors in history. Our presentation will explore the common themes and connections that bind these literary voices, transcending time, culture, and experiences. As we go into their biographies, notable works, and key themes, we will uncover the essence of their literary contributions and the enduring relevance of their words. So without further ado, we'll begin. So what is queer theory? Well, it could be a way of thinking that challenges traditional ideas about gender and who we're attracted to. It all began in the late 20th century when people wanted to question and change how society thinks about these things. And it also queer theory says that we should be open to different ways of being and loving, and celebrates the fact that people are unique and don't fit into categories. Queer theory also has some important people who have shared big ideas, like Judith Butler. She talks about something called performativity, which means that we create our gender identity by the way we act and behave, not just because of how we were born. And even through queer theory, it started a while ago, it's still changing and fitting with how society changes. And it likes to celebrate the fact that people are unique and have complex identities, so it keeps up with times and helps us understand the world. And so, diving into the authors, we see that they have differences, and they also have similarities by their poems, essays, and writings. Beginning with Aga Shahid Ali, he was born in New Delhi, India in 1943, and later became a Kashmir American poet, and he studied in India and the United States, earning his PhD at Pennsylvania State University. His background reflects his unique position as a poet of the Kashmir diaspora. Something significant about his life was he was shaped by his experiences as a Kashmir living in exile. His personal and cultural displacement played a central role in his poetry, exploring themes of longing, nostalgia, and the beauty of his homeland. Some of his notable works would be his poetry collections, including The Beloved Witness, The Half-Inch Himalayas, and The Veiled Suite. His works have received critical acclaim and contributed to his recognition as a prominent Kashmir American poet. And we see some key themes about his poetry. It revolves around themes of love, longing, exile, and the cultural richness of Kashmir. His verses are known for their lyrical beauty and exploration of the emotional complexities of human experience. Heading on to Dorothy Parker. She was born in Long Branch, New Jersey in 1893. Was an iconic American poet, writer, and satirist. She was known for her sharp wit and humor, which found its roots in her New York upbringing and experiences during the Jazz Age. Parker's involvement in the Algonquin Round Table, which is a group of writers, intellectuals, greatly influenced her literary career. And it was during this time that her satirical style blossomed. Some of her notable works were Enough Rope, Sunset Gun, and her sharp-witted reviews for The New Yorker. Her wit and her humor earned her a lasting place in American literature. And Parker's works often satirize societal norms, explore the complexities of love and relationships, and provide a critical commentary on the human condition. Going into Edna St. Vincent Millay, she was born in Rockland, Maine in 1892. She was a prolific American poet and playwright known for her lyrical and romantic poetry. Alea's poetic talent was evident from a young age, and she won a scholarship to Vassar College, where she continued to develop her craft. Her education and exposure to modernist poetry influenced her style. Her notable works were she won a Pulitzer Prize for Poetry in 1923 for her collection, The Ballad of the Harper Weaver, and some other works include Renaissance and Other Poems, and a few figs from Thistles. Key themes from her poetry explore themes of love, desire, individualism, and the pursuit of personal and artistic freedom. Going into Audre Lorde, she was born in New York City in 1934, was a prolific African-American poet, writer, and civil rights activist. She lived through a time of significant social change and was deeply influenced by the civil rights and feminist movements. Lorde's activism and advocate for marginalized communities were essential to her life. She often addressed issues related to race, gender, sexuality, and social justice. And notable works include Sister Outsider, The Black Unicorn, and A New Spelling of My Name. Through her works, she received numerous awards for her contributions to literature and activism. Her key themes were her writing focused on themes of intersectionality, identity, empowerment, and the struggle for equality. Lorde's poetry, essays continue to inspire social justice movements. Heading on to Elizabeth Acevedo. She was a contemporary Dominican American poet and novelist. She was born in New York City. Her cultural heritage and experiences as a young African Latina woman significantly shaped her work. And her background in performance poetry and spoken word strongly influenced her style, making her a powerful voice in literature. Her notable works was she gained acclaim for her debut novel, The Poet X, which won the National Book Award for Young People's Literature, and some other works were With the Fire on High and Clap When You Land. Key themes of her works often explore themes of identity, cultural heritage, coming of age, and the transformative power of spoken word and poetry. And her writing style is marked by its authenticity. Heading on to Qing Jin. He is a contemporary poet, writer who was born in Taiwan, and he is known for his exploration of identity, migration, and social justice issues. His background as a Taiwanese immigrant and a writer deeply informs their work, leading to a strong commitment to activism and storytelling. Chen is the author of The Heart's Traffic and Recombinant, and his writings have been recognized by their powerful and thought-provoking narratives. Key themes in his work include the complexities of identity, belonging, displacement, and activism. And they often explore the intersection of different aspects of identity. Going on to Billy Collins, he's an American poet, was born in New York City in 1941, and served as the U.S. Poet from 2001 to 2003, and is known for his accessible and humorous poetry. Collins' love for poetry developed during his academic year as a professor and was influenced by his study of classic and modern art. His works include The Trouble with Poetry, Sailing Alone Around the Room, and Aimless Love. Collins is celebrated for his ability to engage readers with relatable and witty poems. Some themes in Colin's poetry often explore everyday experiences, such as the beauty of ordinary movements and the power of language and imagination. His humor and accessibility make poetry more approachable for a wider audience. Heading down to our last author, Langston Hughes. He was a African American poet and writer, and was born in Joplin, Missouri in 1902, and played a pivotal role in the Harlem Renaissance and the Civil Rights Movement. Hughes' experiences as an African American in a racially divided America, deeply influenced by his writings, driving his commitment to racial pride and social justice. His notable works include The Weary Blues, Montage of a Dream Deferred, and The Negro Speaks of Rivers. And Langston Hughes is considered a literary icon and a leading figure of the Harlem Renaissance. Key themes in Hughes' work include racial pride, African American culture, social justice, and the complexities of identity in America. His poetry resonates with readers through its emotive and powerful language. And looking at the common themes and connections, we could see that these authors commonly go into love, relationships, identity, self-exploration, social justice, and activism. And some questions we could discuss about this is how do these authors' portrays of love and relationships differ across cultures, time periods, and personal experiences? And are there recurring themes or approaches to self-exploration that can be identified in their writings? And lastly, in what ways do these authors use their literary voices to advocate for social justice and equality?
Thank you very much, Ethan, for that information on our lovely authors. Now let's talk about the tools that they use, the voice as well as line lengths and line endings. Starting with voice, this is a pretty straightforward tool. It is the author's voice coming through in their writing. However, just as authors of novels, novellas, and short stories aren't always the person speaking in their stories, the author of a poem is not always the person who is speaking in that poem. Our textbook provides us 3 short snippets from Robert Browning, and I will read them for you now. The first from Soliloquy of the Spanish Cloister. Grr, there go my heart's abhorrence. Water your damned flower pots do. If hate killed men, Brother Lawrence, God's blood would not mine kill you. The second, from My Last Duchess, a very short snippet, reads, That's my last Duchess, painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. And the third snippet, from Porphyria's Lover, reads, The sun set early in tonight, the sullen wind was soon awake, it tore the elm tops down for spite, and did its worst to vex the lake. I listened with heart fit to break. These 3 poems, reading slightly differently due to their formatting and language used, are still very clearly spoken by 3 different people. The first snippet, mentioning a Brother Lawrence, is likely a monk. The second, mentioning his last Duchess, likely a duke, very different from a monk. And while we're not sure the status or class or job of the speaker in our third passage, we are able to know that he is a jealous man with a heart broken over Porphyria, we can assume. However, voice isn't strictly relegated to a first-person perspective. You also get a notable voice in third-person perspective when used in poetry. For example, I will be using El Dorado by Edgar Allan Poe. Gaily bedight, a gallant knight, in sunshine and in shadow, had journeyed long singing a song in search of El Dorado. But he grew old, this knight so bold, and o'er his heart a shadow. He fell as he found not a spot of ground that looked like El Dorado. And as his strength failed him at length, he met a pilgrim shadow. Shadow, said he, where can it be, this land of El Dorado? Over the mountains of the moon, down the valley of the shadow. "Ride, boldly ride," the shape replied, "if you seek for El Dorado." Now, this is a third person, of course, third person perspective, which makes it a little more difficult to compare to the first person perspective we had been provided. But fortunately, our textbook provides us with another poem from a third person perspective, this one more semi-omniscient. It reads, this is a discussion of the Mona Lisa, written in 1893 by Walter Pater. "She is older than the rocks among which she sits. Like the vampire, she has been dead many times and learned the secrets of the grave, and has been a diver in deep seas and keeps their fallen day about her, and trafficked for strange webs with Eastern merchants. And as Leda was the mother of Helen of Troy, and as St. Anne the mother of Mary, and all this has been to her but the sound of lyres and flutes, and lives only in the delicacy with which it has molded the changing lineaments and tingled the eyelids and hands." This is another third-person perspective, but sounds drastically different due to the voice used. I'm sure there's no person we can give this voice to, but there still is a distinct air of how they speak. Another thing that drastically affects how we get the voice from these poems is their line lengths and endings. W.B. Yeats, was asked to edit the Oxford Book of Modern Verse, and this was the passage he started with, and this is how he had divided it up. I will read this section, taking into note how he divided the poem. "She is older than the rocks among which she sits. Like the vampire, she has been dead many times, and learned the secrets of the grave, and has been a diver in deep seas, and keeps their fallen day about her, and trafficked for strange webs with Eastern merchants, and, as Leda, was the mother of Helen of Troy, and, as St. Anne, was the mother of Mary. And all this has been to her but as the sound of lyres and flutes, and lives only in the delicacy with which it has molded the changing lineaments and tingled the eyelids and the hands." It's the same exact words, but it is a completely different poem due to how it is formatted. So it is important to take into note the spacing and the alignment of all of the poems when reading them. Now I will pass you over to Andrew, who will be offering his perspectives as well as ours on the poems provided for readings this week.
In Agha Shahid Ali's postcard from Kashmir, we get a sense of longing for the nostalgia of home, or a homeland that maybe was once left behind. And I think a standout line is the entire second and third stanza, where he goes on to say that he loved neatness, and now he holds a half-inch Himalayas in his hand, which is obviously a postcard from home. But he then mentions that this is home, and it's the closest that he's ever going to get to it, which is just right there in his hand. But when he returns, will the colors still be as vibrant and brilliant as he remembers them? He then later says in the final stanza that his memory will be a little bit out of focus. And we all know that as time goes on, our memories and interpretations of things that are so near and dear to us, like a homeland, for example, end up fading, and we don't remember them to be the way they are. So could this possibly be a bit of a criticism on what he remembers as home? He might have this postcard that is showing, the beautiful Himalayan mountains of Kashmir and what he remembers, but when he goes back, is it going to still convey the same beauty that he once recalled or that he once remembered? Moving on to A Certain Lady by Dorothy Parker. This poem is definitely one that can speak to many individuals. I think at one time or another, we've all had feelings for someone that we knew very well didn't love us back, and we also knew we were never going to get that from them. And I think the lines that stand out and reflect that are the lines, "The thousand little deaths my heart has died, and you believe so well I know my part, that I am gay as morning, light as snow, and all the straining things within my heart you'll never know." And I love that she even ends her second stanza with "you'll never know." But the line before that is, and what goes on, my love, while you're away, you'll never know. So throughout the whole poem, she's basically saying that she puts on this wonderful facade. She dolls herself up by, painting her mouth a fragrant red so she can totally look the part, look cute, and act happy, and act as if she's not bothered by the presence of the person that just makes her heart sing. But once this person goes away, she's just longing for a relationship with them, to hold them, to feel them, and to have them do the same for her. But I think, a question to ponder here is, what damage can occur by masking truth for an extended period of time for someone you love, that you want to be with, despite not knowing that you can't be with them or if they'll never love you back? But also, why do we continue to linger on someone that doesn't love us back? What is it that brings us happiness in longing for an individual that may not want us back? And it makes me think of that really popular song by the Cranberries, Linger, that famous part of the chorus. Do you have to let it linger? Why do we let that linger? Now, in Edna St. Vincent Millay's I, Being Born a Woman and Distressed, this is clearly a detached love poem. It's a love poem for sure. It's expressing admiration and desire for a partner, but at the same time wanting to still retain a sense of self-power and independence. For example, the line, to clarify the pulse and cloud of the mind and leave me once again undone possessed. Think not for this, however, the poor treason of my stout blood against my staggering brain. I shall remember you with love or season. So it's basically hinting that she knows she cannot resist the urges to have a sexual desire or attraction for somebody, but at the same time, she's not going to leave herself possessed by a man or a woman or whoever she's in love with. She's not going to let that completely just cloud her judgment and take over her, and just still be able to have a sense of letting go when need be. So when she ends the poem by saying, I find this frenzy insufficient reason for conversation when we meet again. So that way there's still a sense of comfort, upon meeting again in future circumstances. But a lingering question here would be, why would it be that some human emotions cannot be fixed and can also lead to conflicted responses in people, especially a unity between two people? In Power by Audre Lorde, this is clearly a very deep, dark piece that she wrote that really touches a lot on the outcomes of hatred, violence, racism between marginalized communities. But at the same time, there's also what feels like a plea to take a path of, taking empathy and understanding what it is by expressing yourself through poetry rather than resulting to, destruction and violence, especially possibly in the Black community, which she writes about. And the entire last stanza really touches on that by basically her saying that she does not know this destruction within her. She hasn't been able to act on it, but she chooses to use her use of poetry to basically express herself, because she knows that if she took to the act, like she says at the end, of, murdering and raping an 85-year-old white woman and, burning her alive, the person that's going to feel sorry for anyone is going to be that poor lonely white woman, with the Greek chorus saying, poor thing, she never hurt a soul, what beasts they are. There's really a lot of evidence there that she is saying that no one is going to want to care about what her feelings are as that Black woman that did what she did, because she touches on how there is 4 centuries of white male approval on the Black community, and how there is a lot of corruption and absolute power, especially in the case that she gives about the 37-year-old policeman that murdered a young Black child and was quite violent about it. And as we all know, a lot of hate towards another group or individual or anything in that matter can result in really horrific, violent outcomes. So I think a question to ask is, why would it be that she using this poem as a warning to say, like, this is what can happen if, you don't take your rage seriously, by putting it into poetry and rhetoric the way she does, because, if you touch on that destruction, really, what is that outcome going to be? Moving on to Manhunt, or Ode to First Kisses by Elizabeth Acevedo. The structure of this poem, and even reading it out loud, it's very, very slam poetry style, which is exactly what Elizabeth Acevedo is. She's a modern day slam poet, and it's very evident in here. But the topic of this poem of hers is very much touching on the aspect of just the nostalgia of childhood, the memories that we had of being young, wild, and carefree. What's really fascinating is that she openly admits halfway through the poem that, you know, she's like, this is now where it's expected of me to shift it to something negative, right? You know, commenting on, you know, the police and how brutal they are, or the things that, you know, kids go through, which can be an unfortunate event, such as assault or alcoholic parents. But she then strays away and says, no, I'm basically not going to write about that, by saying, you know, sometimes being honest means offering more than one draft, as she writes in that one stanza. It's basically just her saying, no, there is more honesty in her poetry, and the game is pretty much that she's speaking of this manhunt game is kind of like an analogy to the anticipation and yearning of your youth. Because really, when, you know, we're kids, we were so eager to grow up and do this, and, you know, by going to college, and do that by getting a good job and having kids and getting married. But once we, you know, become adults and we get into that mind frame that we were yearning for so much as kids, we seem to have a re-yearning to go back to those innocent days of being in that time and place that she so beautifully puts by saying she's in the July air, and you're waiting desperately for that countdown so the game can begin that chase. And that's what we want so bad. So there's an obvious connection to chasing adulthood as a kid, whereas when we're finally in the throes of adulthood, we chase back for that nostalgia of being innocent and wanting to be with our friends and having just a good time. And that poses a great question, is why are we so curious to grow up as kids, and then when we are here grown-ups now living that life that we thought looked so glamorous that our parents may have portrayed for us, why are we now yearning for that nostalgia? Why are we always wanting to dwell on being, oh, I was a cool 2000s kid, or I was a cool 90s kid and watched Rugrats until the cows came home? Why is it that we find ourselves yearning for that nostalgia of childhood over and over? The second work that is being observed by Elizabeth Acevedo is Mira Muchacha. And this is such a really, really deep piece of work to read because, you know, again, we've all had that instance with a parent or any kind of guardian where you have that relationship of feeling that you have done something wrong, especially in the opening lines when she says, you know, I already know I've done something wrong, when she hits me with the look girl, because, you know, Mira Muchacha translates to look girl, but, you know, this time it's Mira Muchacha rather than look girl. Being, you know, someone that comes from a half Hispanic household, I knew that's when I myself was in serious trouble when my dad would bust out the Spanish on me versus the English. The English, it was not too serious of a situation, but the Spanish was, oh no, like, you are going to shut your mouth and you're going to listen. But that right there is a memory that felt very familiar by hearing the just, you know, not to correct the parent, even if you know that they're wrong, in them scolding you. So I feel like that there is a lot of obvious disconnect in the relationship between anyone, either a mother and a daughter, a mother and son, father-daughter, because this situation can really go any way. And in Elizabeth's case, it goes, you know, in her way as a mother-daughter relationship. But she clearly is longing on being heard and communicating with her mother the way she wants to. But she knows that if she does try to communicate by asserting herself, she knows that even deeper consequences are going to follow than what she's getting in this moment, which is just a strict talking to, and even possible, you know, ultimatums of, if you do that again, yeah, you know, I'm going to wring your neck. You might not physically do it, but it's just it's the code for knowing that you're going to be an absolute doo-doo if the rules are broken. So, you know, she ends the line very powerfully by saying, you know, that the only person who isn't heard in this house is her. And why is that the case? Is it because we know that no matter what, as the child, automatically our defaulted role is to just keep sweet and obey what our parents say at all times? Are we not allowed to assert ourselves? is there an issue with asserting ourselves to our parents, or is there truly an order that needs to be maintained in a household between, parent and child, that you must just do what they say, even if it is perceived the wrong way from what the parents saw and didn't get enough evidence? Pretty much what she is trying to convey here. So American Syntax is a poem by Ching-En Chen. Ching-En Chen is known as a genderqueer in the LGBTQ community, uses they-them pronouns, and this poem in particular kind of feels a lot like being viewed as negatively portrayed in the eyes of what may be a conservative or old-fashioned teacher. And the relationship that is possibly looming between the two of them, which may not be a good one. And the opening line describes this educator as being straight-backed, which clearly indicates that this person is stern, strict, well in their ways, and really isn't open to new ideas. It's like you can't help but kind of visualize, a really crepidly old teacher that's probably been doing this since, the late 60s or so, and probably just isn't so used to the norm of people expressing themselves today, especially college students for that matter. But the fact that there's kind of hinted expectations for students to conform and maintain a certain level of expectation to a classroom like this talks about the whole squeezed juice of a greedy sponge. It just seems like it's just something that is being squeezed out of them. They cannot be themselves. They can't express themselves in this classroom. And the poem seems to end that the teacher is ready to strike at the speaker, knowing that the looming tension between them is coming. And it seems to kind of set a lot of expectations to, conforming to what is perceived as a norm in that classroom to the teacher, whereas the speaker may not have an opportunity to be themselves. And if they continue to do so, it's just going to prove a lot of tension in that class for them. And why this could be an important topic is, why would it be okay to express yourself in, a classroom with what you write, with how you portray yourself, and why should it not really be seen as an issue, especially in today's day and age? The Lanyard by Billy Collins is without a doubt a very touching and moving piece that touches on the relationship between a mother and son. It can definitely be interpreted as mother and daughter, even if you wanted it to, because it could work in both ways. But why it's such a beauty in just the admiration and adoration for one's mother is he goes very into full detail about saying, all I did was make this little lanyard at a camp, and I was to gift it to my mother, but how could I really repay her when looking at the bigger picture? And that one stanza he starts with, she gave me life and milk from her breasts, and I gave her a lanyard. She nursed me in many a sick room, lifted spoons of medicine to my lips, laid cold face cloths on my forehead, and then led me out into the airy light and taught me to walk and swim, and I in turn presented her with a lanyard. So I think there's a lot of just feeling that there's not worthiness to pay back for the love that's both physical and unconditional from a mother to their child. And the best that he could do at that time in his innocence and youth is to gift his mother with a simple lanyard, hoping that it would make things even. And it appears that the interpretation at the end says that, yeah, there is a sense of evenness, because even though a child may not have enough to give back to repay their mother for, the responsibilities of motherhood and taking care of her child who she loves so much, can never really be replaced. And the best he can express it at that time is with just a simple craft that he made. And that really poses that question, is why is there a sense of gratitude and realization that a gift like a simple lanyard really can't repay the love and care received from a parent? And even if it can, how can it? What kind of hidden symbolisms can one interpret from such a gift of being repaid for something that is not just required of you, but, is a duty that you chose to take on as a parent? Finally, we have Let America Be America Again by Langston Hughes. And this This poem is very powerful and moving for the time it was written, and in a way it seems like it's very relevant with what's happening in our country today, with a lot of the division that has been going on and a lot of cries for equality from not just one marginalized group but from several. The first half of the poem, he goes on to talk about the promises that America gave to everybody, hoping that this would be a land of dreamers that could make their dream come alive, where no one had to bow down to a monarchy anymore, that there was just nothing but equality for man, woman, child, no matter what their skin color, their status, whatnot. He then in the next half poses a question: the free? And then goes on with, who said the free? Not me. And then he lists examples by millions of people on what seems to be relief, possibly government relief. Could that be government relief? Could that be any kind of local community relief that helps people stand up on their feet rather than be down when they should be up? He talks about people that have nothing for their pay, people that are killed for striking by using their voices, which we were so told we're allowed to use, but when we do, it just results in us getting hurt or possibly killed. So in a way, he really points out a lot of the inconsistencies, the condescensions, and pretty much the promises that were never kept by the American promise and in the American dream. But what is really nice about this piece, too, is that he does seem to end it with an idea of that there is hope. There could possibly be a redemption, and there needs to be changes by having America take on a commitment to live up to the ideals and promises that were given to not just our ancestors, but to the future, which is now us, so many years ago. And he ends the poem with, a nice, powerful statement saying, America will be. He truly has beliefs that all these injustices and challenges will be able to be overcome, and this land can be true to freedom and equality as promised so many years ago. And, it leaves the question to, will we be in a spot to overcome the injustices and inequalities that have persisted in American history? And going back to what I said before about how it seems that today there is a lot of division, there's a lot of conflict in our country, and things don't feel the same way as before. With what's happening now, do we feel that this poem can be relevant? Can we really overcome any sort of inequality and unjustness that is looming and lingering around this country, and will we ever be able to have a more inclusive society for everyone?